Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker and I'm your host. And today I'm excited to talk about a topic around adaptability and unlearning. This word has come up for me 3 times today, so it's so appropriate that we're going to be discussing that. And I have Wolfe with me, and he is the perfect person to discuss this with, as he considers himself the millennial trapped in the baby boomer's body. So we'll see more about that. And he's president of Poise for Future Company, founder of Success Performance Solution. He's a fellow TEDx speaker. He's a top 5 global thought leader on future of work in HR, Thinker 360, and on and on and on, right? So all these accolades, has a lot to offer. And without further ado, Ira, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks very much, Penny. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Me too. As I said, this word unlearning has come up 3 times today. Well, anyway, let's back up. And before we get into and dive into that part of the topic, how did you get here? Like in 2 minutes, what's your story, Ira?
Yeah, in 2 minutes. I've been called a Renaissance man, and I don't know, I guess maybe in olden days, that just meant you could keep a job, but I've been pretty fortunate in my career. For the last 25 years, I've had my business, Success Performance Solutions. Always loved the business side, the marketing side, working with people. But prior to that, I actually started as a dentist. I had a very successful practiced until I was 44. All along the way, I knew I was going to do something different. I thought I'd continue practicing, but I would be maybe consulting dentists how to run their business better. It wasn't about the clinical side. It was all about the business side. And
that's the part that you found that you just always loved, and it wasn't the actual patient work.
Yeah, in my TED Talk, and there was one of the first lines in there was, I loved everything about being a dentist, but doing the dentistry.
Which apparently, I think a lot of people can also appreciate, that maybe the thing they love that got them into doing what they're doing isn't the thing that they really loved about it. And they might feel kind of stuck with that.
We're on this theme of learning, unlearning, adaptability. Mm-hmm. We're at a crossroads. So many people are at a crossroads. What am I going to do, post-pandemic? They were there before, but it really brought everything home. And I struggled with that from the day I opened my practice, and it was successful. I loved building it. I loved growing it. We were computerized in 1987. Right. So again, the theme of adaptability just has been with me. So it's not that I couldn't keep a job. It's just that I kept evolving. And, just like in relationships or in business, the first day you love what you do, and then it gets old. And I just enjoyed everything about dentistry, but dentistry, which is what most professionals hate, to be honest. Dentists don't like running the business. Physicians don't like running the business. They usually don't go hand in hand. Engineers, accountants, attorneys. Professionals really said, if it wasn't for the clients and it wasn't for the patients, I'd love what I do. I frankly loved all the other part. It was just very hard to manage professionals. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have dentists and physicians or attorneys as I don't want them as clients, but I didn't want them to be my employees. One is they're independent. They're super smart people, and they're not the easiest group to manage. I didn't have that opportunity. As the next stage was, I started this business, but I also was a VP of a hospital for a couple of years. So I did have the opportunity to manage physicians and realized I wasn't doing that for a lifetime either. But I've had this business for 25 years. I've been really focused on helping companies grow, helping them hire the right people, attract the right people. And everything we're talking about today is a part of that, because companies can't find the right people, and individuals are really struggling to figure out what they want to be when they grow up, even if they are a baby boomer.
Absolutely. And there's a whole different topic there. But what I want to focus on, you mentioned that you're constantly going to the next level and growing, and we talk about unlearning. What does unlearning have to do with growth?
I too was just introduced to that term about a year ago, because ever since I've been young, I was told how important education was. And then as I went through my career, it was about continuing education, continuous learning. I was always active in that, taking whether it was clinical courses 20, 40 years ago, or it was management courses, or just reading, and just in general. I've always learned, but I never heard the term unlearning. I was like, how do you just keep piling more and more information? How do you squeeze more in there? And I guess I did some of it intuitively, because I would read something new and go, that's a better idea. So I'm either going to do literally a brain dump. I'm just going to forget what I used to know, what I learned in the past, or I'm going to put it away because I may need it at some time, just like reorganizing your desk, reorganizing your file cabinets. You eventually got to go through there because you run out of room. You got to get rid of all the clutter, get rid of all the duplicate stuff, you get rid of all the junk you created, and you make room for the new things. The challenge today, it happens so fast. We are literally moving at lightning speed. Things change, as we all experienced about 16 months ago. Overnight, things changed. And things that we thought weren't going to work, things that we thought we'd have to learn, we had to repackage that. And we had to unlearn a lot of our old behaviors.
Well, we had a little help, right? We had a little help to unlearn, a little push.
Oh, we had a huge,
it wasn't working.
I'm not sure people would say that's help. That was the help. But yeah, we were told we had to cut the cord. Like, if you want a job, you want to get paid, you're going to learn how to work from home. You're going to learn how to set up your own computer. You're going to learn how to figure out how to talk on a webcam. You're going to have to learn how to present yourself. You're going to have to learn some basic skills. And again, that was learning new skills. But it also meant that people had to unlearn the way they did it, because the way you managed people, the way you participated in a meeting, you couldn't do it exactly the same way. It wasn't just that you were sitting 10, 50, 1,000 miles apart, because we had to unlearn how we participated in a team meeting. You had to learn new ways to do it, and you had to unlearn old ways.
Right. I always reckon it. I say a lot. I say things work until they don't. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you go along doing things the way that you've always done them, or in a certain way, and it gets you to a certain level, but then it stops working for whatever reason, circumstance, maybe we've changed, maybe the team has changed, team dynamic. And so it requires us to look at things differently, right? And that means to give up the way that we've always done it, which means we have to unlearn that so that we can learn something new. Or you said it earlier, I really like that, create space.
Right. Yeah.
Space for something new.
And depending, some people may understand what defragging a hard drive is. I mean, some people won't, but oftentimes we get a hard drive. Now we have such huge hard drives, but you have the space, and 3, 4, 5, 6 years go by and everything gets collected. You never clean it out. So every time you download a file, you get all these temporary files, but you have old files, you have duplicate files, you've downloaded the same thing 10 times because you can't find the original. But there really is, a defrag is just this automatic process that you go through it and it reorganizes stuff, and it says, okay, we can delete these 1,450 files because you don't need them anymore. You haven't used this file in 6 years, get rid of it. But there's a lot of other information that just got distributed. So you had a file here and then you edit it and then it got saved someplace else. So it does all this stuff. It reorganizes, it gets rid of the unnecessary files, the duplicate files, reorganize, and all of a sudden you've got 3/4 of your space back or half of your space back. That's what we need to do with our brains. I mean, that's ultimately what unlearning is. Unlearning is defragging our brain. And so if you want to create space or defragging, I mean, whatever term works for you to make you understand, right, that's what it is. But we absolutely have to do that.
And I think there's a couple different things here, right? There's building skills, which we can talk about separately, and unlearning, but there's also in that hard drive, there's belief systems that were learned. And so one of the things that I said, and I'm pretty sure I have it as one of the principles in my book, is anything that can be learned can be unlearned, because people hold on to things and go, that's just the way it is, or that's just the way I am, or that's the only way to believe. And so we just have to remind ourselves that whatever can be learned can be unlearned. So open space for new beliefs. And one point, people thought the earth was flat. Maybe some people still believe that, but the majority of people now have moved on.
Yeah, we have enough conspiracy theories out there of things that you would never think were possible. And who knows, some of them may be true and some of them may not be. But no, you're absolutely right. Again, until 16 months ago, 98% of executives said that telecommuting would never work. We can't run our business remotely. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, we can, and we can be profitable and people get work done.
That is a perfect example of unlearning, right? Of a belief system of we can't work this way.
But some people haven't learned that yet. Some people are just chomping at the bit to bring everybody back in because it was a 1-year experiment. And it's like, well, we didn't like managing people remotely because we couldn't see when they were actually working. Did the work get done? Yes.
Right.
That's the important part. Yeah.
But isn't that commonplace in our lives everywhere is that we bring resistance, right? And so instead of embracing and see what's working in this new model and how can we use it to our advantage, there are still some companies and people who are in resistance and they don't want to work like that.
So there's a couple parts to that. One is a friend of mine introduced me to this. There's a model out there and it talks about that human beings are addicted to certainty. That's our addiction. We need predictability. And for the last 100 or so years in the Industrial Revolution, and we've gone through a couple of them, but that through Frederick Taylor's work, Scientific Management, Henry Ford, Sloan from GM, they all standardized the way we did things. We worry about humans become dehumanized and robots taking the job. But what they did, and it was a successful format, it was a successful business model for 80 of the last 100 years, is that they created standardization. We had TQM and Six Sigma and lean manufacturing. We squeezed out inefficiency and essentially turned people into robots. If you follow our rules or follow our guidelines, this is what your job is, this is how much you get paid, this is what your career looks like. If you add these skills onto it, or you work for us for 5 years, you can move up. But everything was structured. And that worked because we fed people's addiction for certainty. We are now living in an era of perpetual uncertainty. I love this term the other day. I don't like the term new normal, getting back to normal, which I don't like because we're not going back to normal. There's no such thing as doing that. I talk about moving forward to the next waves of normals, multiple, because there's going to be different normals for different people in different regions and different times of different socioeconomic groups. And it's going to continually come in waves. So we have next waves of normal. What I heard the other day was about never normal. We are now living in an era of never normal. So that flies in the face of what we just talked about, of being addicted to certainty, of having never normals, which makes people very uncomfortable. So stress. Then the question,
it creates stress. And that's why we are exhausted by all this
that we're trying to
control that we can't control.
It is exhausting. And my mind, as in the millennial mindset, it's certainly the age of my brain and mind is older, but my millennial mindset certainly is one thing, but the body doesn't always want to keep up with it. So there's a little bit of a fight there. But with that is talking about that adaptability, where unlearning has been identified as one of 5 critical skills that are important for adaptability. Adaptability is more than just flexibility. It's more than reacting to a situation. And 2 of the big buzzwords of 2020, and one of them has actually been around for a little bit longer than that, was grit and resilience. So you talk about grit, which from Angela Duckworth's work, tremendous research, talked about grit, which was perseverance and having a passion for that. So last year, certainly people needed grit. They needed a perseverance to get through. Working from home, 2 kids, internet, struggles, and just worry, just anxiety about what was going to happen. And then sometimes dealing with parents or loved ones or family or friends, being detached, loneliness, very stressful. So we needed grit. No question that we need grit. But you said something earlier. The problem with grit, it's about endurance and perseverance.
Right.
It's the exact opposite. You said sometimes that you hit this brick wall. It's like, it's worked. And people say, well, if we just work harder at it, if we focus.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
I've tried that. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I tried it too. That's why I got out of dentistry as well. So I tried all different ways to do that.
But aren't they all different ways of resistance too? Like I'm coming up as I'm hearing you talk, right? And you talk about this addiction to certainty. and adaptability, what's in between and keeping us from that is this resistance because we want to have that level of certainty. So we are trying to control and get back to that certainty. And I think that that's what's pulling us in away from it and maybe creating some challenges.
I won't say it's more complicated that, but I think there's different facets to that. Because why did I stay so long when I really didn't enjoy it? And I kept tweaking it, I kept changing it, I kept doing things differently. Mine wasn't necessarily a fear of the change or the addiction to certainty. In fact, I probably was addicted to uncertainty as I kept changing things. The challenge was more a fear of, and I want to say what people thought because I really didn't care, but it's a fear of quitting. It's like everything that people told me. You invested, I had 8 years of school. I had 4 years of college, 8 years of professional school, 2 years in the public health service, a year of a general residency. So I had 12 years into it.
They call that sunk cost, I think.
And then invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into my practice to build it and build.
Right.
It's like, why would you walk away from that? And so, part of it wasn't a fear of failure, fear of what people thought, but it was like, am I quitting? And so I think there's different things, but most people are fearful of the future. They're fearful of the unknown. They don't like to take those risks. So I think for the majority of people, you're right. But if there's anybody else there in my position, I went through a marriage that I should have gotten out way earlier. So there's personal things that people just do because you think you can fix it. If you work harder, you can work at it. And in that case, you were probably right.
Well, and like you said, it's more complicated, right? Because it also depends on what our values are. And so it sounds like that quitting is an opposite to some of your values. And so that creates also a challenge in moving through it. But
which fits into one of the other components of adaptability. So we talked about unlearning, which was one. We talked about grit. Resilience is part of that too, is that inevitably when we try something new, we need to be resilient because we're going to have setbacks. Just because you make the decision to change doesn't mean it's a cakewalk. Sometimes there's a lot lifted off our shoulders and we can move on and a lot less pressure. And how many times did you do that? You go, oh, it wasn't as scary as I thought. But you still have to be resilient. There's still going to be setbacks in life and we're going to have to rebound. But grit and resilience are, although they're critical for every stage of our life, they don't help you grow. They just help you get back to where you are or keep going. So when we look at how do you grow, how do you move beyond the present? How do you become better and stronger than you were? Unlearning is part of it. Growth mindset, you're probably familiar with that term, but growth and fixed mindset. And I think that's the part that we were just talking about. I think growth mindset is that we are continually learning. We're going to continually make mistakes. We learn from our mistakes. We grow. That our intelligence and our abilities aren't fixed. We're just not lucky. We just weren't born smart. No matter whatever stature you are in life, you're going to continue to grow. We're people that have the fixed mindset. And I think that was part of the reasons that I was personally trapped before, is I had multiple degrees. I was always the top of my class. I had a successful practice. And it's like, I can't look dumb. I can't ask a question that people will say, well, I thought you had the answers. That's why I'm coming to you. That's a fixed mindset. And in today's world, in the past, that might have succeeded. In today's world, that's really dangerous because what could be right today or smart today by next month, next year is no longer good enough.
Right.
And so the growth mindset is critical. And it's beyond just having an open mindset. Growth mindset also means that you're confident that even if you try something and it doesn't work out, you can move on. So sometimes—
But isn't that about the learning? Doesn't it come back to the learning and unlearning?
Oh, they're all part of it. And then because
they're like all intertangled.
Right, how can you try something new if you don't have resilience? Because if every time you try something new and it doesn't work out the way you thought, you're crushed, you're emotionally depressed.
Right.
And that doesn't work. And if you don't have grit to kind of plow through it. So there are 5 components of it that all play hand in hand. There are some that are more important. Resilience is absolutely important because you need it through everything. But resilience alone isn't going to allow you to thrive. So we have the growth mindset, which helps that positive. And then the last one is really one of the more challenging aspects of this. And it's called mental flexibility. It's putting CNN Fox News and MSNBC on simultaneously and not throwing things at one of them. It's not getting angry, but digesting all that material and try to take two opposing thoughts at the same time and make sense of it. How do you make sense of the world? Not by listening to one or the other, but both. And that's super hard. And we live in a world of paradox. We live, and I'm going to take it back to the world I live in, and many people are going to be struggling with this now too, is the hybrid workplace. People are looking at this as a binary choice. Which one is better, working in a physical space or working from home? And hybrid is, oh, you can do both. But now hybrid, on a scale of 1 to 100, 1 is going to work, physical space, and 100 is working from home. There are 98 different versions of it in between. Sure. And you read things about, well, you can't be productive if you have a remote workforce. And the other ones go, you could be more productive if you have a more workforce. How do you take all that information? How do you have these conflicting thoughts in your head, mindsets, behaviors, attitudes, values that are now getting challenged? And how do we continue to digest that? So the mental flexibility, and the good news about it, I keep referring to them as abilities. They are skills we can learn. It's documented. There are exercises, there are activities, there's books you can read. There are ways that we can change our behavior. We can improve our grit. We can become more resilient. We can develop a growth mindset. We can develop more mental flexibility, and we can learn to unlearn. So the good news is we can do that. The challenge is getting people to accept that it's just not second nature. And, well, where do I go to school for that? You can take a class, you can take a
hard knocks, school of hard knocks.
Yeah, a lot of it is practice. Could you learn to unlearn by watching YouTube videos? Yeah, probably. The question is, but you got to do it. I mean, it's not like, well, I took this 4-hour certification and now I'm certified in unlearning and now I'm good at it.
So I said that this topic came up for me a couple times today. So I went and did some research, and I remembered that Tiger Woods had taken his swing and completely learned it fresh and said, I'm going to just deconstruct the whole thing and I'm going to start new and work on a new swing. So I went to do some research, and I found all of these people who tried it and failed. And that, like, they tried it and then they were out of the game. So they never were as good as they were before, or they retired. And Tiger Woods managed to do that 3 times. And there were a couple people that did. So what that tells me is that it's not easy. And it's clearly a decision that you have to make. And like you said, I believe that it does come down to the mindset that you said, is having that open growth mindset to know that you're going to learn something. And all of those things, it really comes back to, it's interesting that you said that, right? You've got to have the grit and the perseverance to get through, because usually you get worse before you get better when you unlearn something, or you keep falling back into old behaviors. You've got to have that resilience. So all of those things that you mentioned and that mental flexibility, I can see how all of that can come into play to make it possible to really grow and unlearn where you need to unlearn.
Right. And it's so interesting that you selected Tiger Woods. That's a great example because, certainly he was at the top of his game. And then while he was at the top of the game, he was talking about changing his swing, and then he wasn't winning. But it took grit and it took resilience, because there's certainly a lot of setbacks. And then he had the drunk driving. Then he had
first. Oh, yeah, there's all that other personal stuff.
But he kept coming back. And then all of a sudden he came back, and there he was again when people thought he was done. And now he's had another accident. So I don't think from Tiger Woods, I mean, we certainly don't know him personally, but from his professional behavior, he's certainly an exemplary example of grit and resilience. The unlearning, I mean, he did unlearn skills. He unlearned personal skills for bad behaviors, counterproductive behaviors, but it showed how difficult it was to be able to do that. Does he have a growth mindset? Oh, absolutely. He had to be able to continually try to do these things. And the mental flexibility is, again, there's probably things that the relationship between him and his father, there's probably things that his father told him that got him where he needed to be, but then all of a sudden stopped him from even growing into the man he needed to be. But that was tough for him because he loved his dad and he was there for him, and that relationship was well documented. But at some point you can love your parents, but sometimes you just have to say, is what he taught me is no longer as effective as it should be. And that's the unlearning part. So the pieces just keep evolving, and you can't really do one without the other, but you at least need to have some of those. or moving forward is going to be very, very difficult.
Absolutely. So share with us an area where you had to unlearn, like something that was a real growth spurt for you that by unlearning enabled you to grow to another level.
I'm going to say my last 26 years has probably been that, because my expectation when I left my practice, I had a very successful practice and I built some good systems and practices in place. But then starting the business, what did that look like? And it took me a couple of years to get my feet on the ground. I did it, I wouldn't say abruptly, but it was probably over a 6-month period. I just was burnt out and ready to get out. And I had a partner and we came up with a way to, it was already in writing. We just followed the path and I can exit. But from what the business looked like when I left to what it is now, it's completely different. I mean, I went out and I thought the original title of the business was Busy Practice. It was BUSI, putting business in practice. It was going to help only professionals, certainly dentists and physicians was an easy market for me. But my first client was an accountant. Second was an attorney. But I never thought I'd be working with manufacturing facilities. My biggest client now is a healthcare facility, but it has nothing to do with the clinical side. It's helping them hire the right people and build the right brand. One of the largest warehouses in the country is a client of mine. What do I know about warehouses? Well, what I know is about hiring people and working, but it took a while to get into that. So I had to unlearn some of the things that worked for me in the past, that on a larger scale, in a different time, in a different industry, in a different location, it had to be very different. Certainly, I had to become comfortable doing tasks. I mean, I've always enjoyed speaking, and I did it 5 years ago. I don't know when you did your TED Talk. It was the most humbling experience. I probably had done 1,000 presentations before. I spoke to international audiences in a foreign language. And literally 2 weeks after 9/11, I was on a plane going to Malaysia. TED Talk's easy. 18 minutes about talking something I'm passionate about. Simple. That was probably one of my biggest unlearning experiences that I had. It was humbling. That tested my grit and my resilience.
What about it was different for you that you had to unlearn?
It's not a presentation. I mean, people coming to me to do a brain dump, to get that expertise out. I speak at conferences. They come to me to hear me for an hour or 3 hours for a workshop. And when I'm there, they want me to do a brain dump. They want to walk away with tips. They want to have my knowledge. That's not what TED Talks are. TED Talks is about sharing an idea. That's their model.
So it's more about heart, more about feeling than transferring skills.
Right. And after that experience, to do a TED Talk now would be a completely different experience than it was, not because it's like, oh, now I know how to do it. And I've thought about it is, what would I talk about? I mean, I had a great topic before. I talked about change.
Right.
No shock. And we talked about VUCA. But honestly, it's 13 minutes. You can see the passion, but it took me a long time to get the story around it. But it was still more presentation. It's like, I want to say this, and we had a few slides. It was, here's the steps, here's the story. There are so many topics now that I can talk about passionately. It's like, I'm doing this. I mean, we've been talking, half hour, 40 minutes. I don't have notes.
Right.
That's what it's about. That's what it taught me to do. How do you talk without notes? How do you talk from the heart?
And that's the way you reach more people, right? I mean, I would do it differently as well. And I think that's why we challenge ourselves with new experiences and new things, is so that we can take us to that new place of understanding of how we can better impact, how we create more meaning for ourselves and others. And at the end, that's really the goal. I think for most people is they just want to be fulfilled. And part of that is really creating more meaning for ourselves and others.
Yeah. Another simple, I won't say it's simple, but just it sounds simple to do, is getting comfortable with saying, I don't know. That took unlearning, and it took getting comfortable, because people are saying, well, you're the expert. And you go, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I don't have that. And we're living in a complicated world. You hear some of the experts, even with COVID, was it yesterday or the day before, they went through this list of everybody who they were interviewing. I think it was in front of Congress, about where do they think the virus came from? And the experts in the world are saying, I don't know. And
right.
So that was another thing that, as an older baby boomer, I've had the opportunity to learn and get comfortable with, just saying, don't know the answer, but let's work together and try to figure out how to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. I've really enjoyed this conversation and really encourage everybody who's listening to really think more about adaptability and this concept of unlearning and how it can support you to become your best self, to help you to grow through your experiences.
It's the number one. Adaptability has been recognized by numerous organizations. McKinsey, Deloitte, Boston Consulting, World Economic Forum has identified adaptability as the number one skill that people will need going forward, and not specific to any job, in just to survive.
Well, right. I think there was another guy that talked about that whole survival of the fittest was really about adaptability.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find more information about you and your book and your TEDx and all of that?
So my company website is Success Performance Solutions. I've got a very active blog up there. I do my own podcast, Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization, and everything gets posted there as well. You can also just type in Ira Wolfe into Google or irawolfe.com, and you can get access to the book and learn a little bit more about me. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. I'm there multiple times a day. So if you ever need to reach out, please connect with me and we'll go from there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And again, thank you all for being here. Please subscribe so that you can stay in touch with the next episodes that are coming up. More great people coming on to discuss topics on how you can work smarter, bring you to that next level, help you to grow, and really embrace the experiences that you're having so that you can learn these lessons and continue to be smarter and smarter in the way that you approach things. My name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.